Welcome back to Weston Watches Wrestling. This is part 2 of my top 30 rivalries from New Japan in the last 3 years since Wrestle Kingdom 11. If you missed part 1, I gave you a whole heap of honorable mentions as well as my first 10 entries, 30 to 21. This is going to be the continuation of that, so if you haven't seen that video, go back and check it out. And then come back to this video. If I can figure out how, I'm still new to the YouTube thing, I'll stick the link somewhere on the screen. If not, it'll be in the description, so we'll see how I can do. But yeah, if you haven't seen that, go check it out. I'm going to get right into this. I don't want to waste any more time with the intro. I have a 4 or 5 pages, I think 5 pages of notes that I want to get through in this video, because really, not that those first 10 matches on this top 30 list, 10 rivalries on this top 30 list, I hope I said rivalries in the intro. Hopefully I did. Not that they weren't great, they aren't great, but things really start to heat up in these 10 and then moving forward. So I might be a little bit more reliant on the notes. I might have just spoiled it. Hopefully it didn't look too hard. I might be a little bit more reliant on the notes in this video than I was in part 1, because I really just want to make sure I do these feuds justice when I talk about them, because they really get more and more incredible as we go. So I just don't want to miss anything, don't want to leave anything out. But I'll try to be looking at you and talking to you as much as I can. So starting things off with number 20, Kota Ibushi versus Tetsuya Naito. These two have had 5 stellar matches on various stages over the past 3 years at G127, G128, New Japan Cup 2019, in Madison Square Garden, and Dominion 2019. Anytime you give the chance for wrestlers of this caliber to go on and deliver on a big stage like they have 5 different times over these past few years, of course you're going to get a good payout for that investment. And that's what New Japan's done, and it really has just felt like over these past few years that New Japan has just kind of been like, we have this big match slot and on this important show. What are we going to do? All right, let's just stick Ibushi and Naito. Let's stick 2 of our best guys out there and just let them go out there and have a match. Which, that speaks to the talent of both guys, but it also is one of the biggest drawbacks of this rivalry, if there is any. Just that sometimes it's felt a bit random, a bit all over the place, and there hasn't been a clear, narrative-driven direction to this rivalry like there is in most of New Japan's great feuds or rivalries. And so yeah, that sometimes has been a bit frustrating. I just sometimes feel like I want more to grasp onto as far as the story between these two. Maybe we'll get that in the past. I think there's still room to explore that. But the other thing that I want to mention about this rivalry is that sometimes, I know you guys will feel me on this, when you watch these two go in the ring, sometimes it's more uncomfortable than fun to watch. And that's just because these are 2 of the most aggressive style wrestlers. I don't know if that's proper English, but these are just 2 guys that want to go out there and put it all on the line every time. And when they're against each other, they're clearly like, all right, let's just go, put our bodies out there, whatever happens, happens, and it gets scary. These guys drop each other on their heads and their necks multiple times each time they meet in the ring. And yeah, it's a little much for me sometimes, so I'm all about these 2 continuing their feud and building up more of a storyline going forward. But if you have more matches, Tetsuya Naito and Kota Ibushi, please be careful. I know that I'm just some overweight dude from Oklahoma, America, that's trying to tell you how to wrestle, but just, I'm a little concerned sometimes, and I know some of these guys watching, some of these girls and whatever watching, probably feel the same way, because your matches just get a little bit out of hand sometimes, so just calm it down and don't hurt yourselves, alright? Let's do our best to be safe in the wrestling. Anyways, moving on to number 19. This might seem like a bit of a cop-out to call this whole thing one rivalry, but in my head, and I'll explain this more later, it just feels like it's all connected and each match clearly led into the other. So, number 19, we have Cody versus Cody Rhodes. Rhodes, do you hear me, WWE? Cody Rhodes! Gosh, I'll go off about this. Cody Rhodes versus Kenny Omega and Slash versus Kota Ibushi versus the Young Bucks. So like I said, that might seem like a cop-out to call this all one thing, but to me, each match clearly leads to the next, and the consequences, most importantly, of each match were really felt, for the most part, amongst all of the guys involved. So here's the list of the matches. We have a Buchi versus Cody from Wrestle Kingdom 12, the Young Bucks versus the Golden Lovers at Strong Style Evolved, Omega versus Cody at Supercard of Honor 2018, Ibushi versus Cody at Wrestling Dontaku 2018, Omega versus Cody at G1 Special San Fran, Omega versus Ibushi at G1 28, which that match feels a little bit more separate to me. It kind of feels like its own thing, but I just wanted to mention it. I'm not really relying on that match for its place on the rankings anyways. I know that match is a fantastic match, and whatever Meltzer gave it and whatever all y'all gave it, I think it's a little bit overrated, just in my opinion. It just felt like I wish they had more time, and just, yeah, there's lots of frustrations in me about the way the whole Ibushi Omega thing concluded, but hopefully that story isn't over yet. Please, God. But G128 Omega versus Ibushi, and then finally Ibushi versus Cody versus Omega at King of Pro Wrestling 2018, which was Omega's final title defense before going into Wrestle Kingdom 13 to face Hiroshi Tanahashi. For me, the in-ring quality of these matches were hit and miss, especially in the Cody singles matches. I'm not even a Cody hater. Like, I don't necessarily love the majority of Cody's singles matches, but I do understand he's an old school guy, and I understand that the way he works matches is intentional, and it is unique, and it sticks out on most modern wrestling cards. So I'm here for Cody Rhodes, and the way he wrestles. But just sometimes his matches have felt a bit flat when you're in this landscape of New Japan where everything is always so epic and extravagant. But at the same time, sometimes it's refreshing, so I get it. That a match between him and Ibushi at Wrestle Kingdom 12, which was kind of just like a teaser before we really got into the meat of this story. And then his other match with Ibushi at Wrestling Dontaku, which was maybe the weakest match of the bunch here, but it definitely had one of the most memorable, gifable spots in New Japan in the last 3 years. That moment, that brutal, terrifying moment where Cody hit the crossroads on Ibushi off the apron through a table. Just, I think that was Wrestling Dontaku. Don't quote me on that, but I know I remember that match being lackluster, but that moment sticking out and just being like, oh my gosh, what did we just see? And then the Omega versus Cody singles matches were also just a little bit for me. They were both a little long, especially that one of Supercard of Honor, which isn't even technically a New Japan event, but it is a part of the story, so I need to include it. Sometimes those matches just dragged a little bit, and the chemistry between the two sometimes clicked really hard, and they sometimes were able to tell this amazing story effectively, but sometimes it just felt messy. And so yeah, those are the criticisms I have as far as the match quality goes. But the matches where Omega and Ibushi were in them together, those matches all seemed to go pretty hard. We had the Bucks versus Golden Lovers at Strong Style Evolved. I think y'all remember that match. Maybe the greatest tag. I said in the last video that Evil and Sanada versus the Young Bucks was the greatest tag team match of the last 3 years, which I think I put an addendum on the screen saying it's the best tag team title match, because this is the best tag team match, period, in my opinion, and probably just in fact that is the truth. And then the match between Ibushi and Omega at G128, like I said, I think it's a little overrated, but and it is a separate thing. But it's still a part of it, and I want to mention it. And then that triple threat at King of Pro Wrestling, I really enjoyed, even though it kind of summed up my problems with this feud in like a microcosm. That match, it was a triple threat. It was ambitious. It was out there. It was extravagant. It was full of amazing spots. But sometimes it just felt like a bit of a mess, like when Omega had to pull the ref out while Ibushi was getting the cover on Cody, which felt like such a hard heel turn, but then they didn't quite handle it like that. Ibushi did get angry and like beat the bleep out of Omega, but yeah, that never really felt like it got a payoff, which, like I was saying, the Omega Ibushi thing just kind of frustrates me when I think about it too much. But yeah, sometimes this storyline felt like a mess is what I'm trying to get at. And it was a little bit inconsistent and all over the place. Sometimes you had to kind of try a little bit to connect the dots, but it did feel cohesive as a whole in the end. And above all else, it was very ambitious, and I think it deserves to be remembered fondly for sure. So yeah, I think the criticisms of that storyline are fair, but it was something, they were trying something new, and I was thoroughly entertained from start to finish. It was maybe like the most memorable part of that 2018 as a whole to me, other than, of course, Omega winning the title, but that was in the midst of that whole storyline, so that also kind of feels like a part of it. Moving on to number 18, Juice Robinson versus Tetsuya Naito. Juice owned the first 10 spots. I think he had 3 or 4 matches in the first 10 entries on this list, and don't worry, this is going to be as high as Juice goes for all y'all Juice haters. But for me, this is one of the most overlooked, underrated rivalries in wrestling, just since I've been watching wrestling for the past, I don't know what it is now, six years. The beginning of this rivalry heating up was a huge part of the show that cemented my love for New Japan Pro Wrestling, which was Sakura Genesis in 2017. You probably remember that show for Shibata versus Okada, or Hiromu squashing, I almost said crushing, goodness. Hiromu squashing Kushida, which, fair enough if that's what you remember that show for, but I remember that show also. Those 2 moments were amazing. That match between Shibata and Okada was amazing, and that moment with Hiromu and Kushida was amazing. But the third moment that sticks out for me on that show is when Juice shockingly pinned the Intercontinental Champion Tetsuya Naito in one of the undercard tag matches. Juice had really stood out to me from the first time I saw him, but this was the moment when I realized that he was truly like a special talent, not just as an in-ring performer, but just the way that he carried himself and the way that he connected with the audience and the way he communicated his emotion. Because the way he sold that pin, getting that pinfall on Naito, was one of the most genuine, organic, just feel-good moments I've seen in wrestling. A lot of the times, like, I'd spent my first 3 or 4 years getting back into wrestling, mostly just watching WWE, and there are feel-good moments in that company, I feel like, but a lot of the times it feels like it's a little bit forced and it's not quite organic, but this just felt like this was, you just buy completely into the story, and this is just a guy that is fighting his way from the bottom in this industry, and he was truly shocked that he pinned one of the guys at the top of New Japan Pro Wrestling, and he sold it like it was the greatest thing that's ever happened to him, and it was just really an awesome moment that I will probably remember forever. Another thing about the rivalry itself that I really enjoy is the way that the characters oppose each other is just brilliant to me. Naito is just so... I love you, Naito. is just so... just tranquilo, and I don't care about anything, and yeah, I might try, I might not try, but I'm still going to beat you because I'm better than you, and yeah, I don't really care about your whole thing. I'm just going to come in here and get the win and leave, and I'm not going to break a sweat. And then Juice is like, I went to WWE and I failed and I was stepped on and spit on, and now I'm here in New Japan and I'm going to fight as hard as I can and show this crowd my fighting spirit and my fire to win them over and just move up this card and rocket my career. And just like the way that those two things counteract each other and come together to tell the stories they tell in the ring, I just really enjoy it. Their match at Toyo no Kuni, I think hopefully I'm saying that correctly, is a super underrated match for me. It was, I think, Juice's first time contesting for a major title in New Japan, and it felt like the beginning of his story that eventually concluded against Jay White, which I mentioned in the previous video. And yeah, Juice just sold his leg that entire match, and it was just an incredible performance by him, and the way that him and Naito played off each other in that match specifically, I just remember being really, really great stuff. It also had that moment where Juice hit that spine buster on the apron, and which was kind of like the first moment in a Juice singles match where it's like, oh dang, this dude is serious. And I just remember, I was still a fairly new fan of the product, but just the way that the crowd was reacting to that match, I was like, this Juice guy has it, and of course Naito has it, but I just think that was such a huge moment in his career. And then moving on, they had matches in the G128 and the G129. The G129 match doesn't stick out in my head as much, but that G128 match was as good as their first match for the IC Championship, except this time Juice was selling his broken hand. There was a moment in that match that I still remember where Naito had a slingshot corner drop kick. I don't know what he calls that move. I'm not a real Naito fan. But I think he has a name for that move. But he hits that slingshot drop kick thing and hit Juice directly in the hand. And I was like, what? Like, it's such a silly thing. And if you're watching this video and you're not a wrestling fan, which if you are, then leave. Like, why are you here? Why are you wasting your time with this? But just whenever he impacted his foot to his hand just directly, I was like, I just popped so hard for that. And I felt so silly about it, but like, that's wrestling. Like, these little nuances to these stories, to these matches that tell the greater story at hand. Like, it's just what I think makes us all fall in love, and it was just such a cool, subtle moment. And Naito went after that hand that whole match, and I'm pretty sure Naito ended up winning that time. I think that Naito's 3-0 against Juice, but I just specifically remember Naito's targeting of the hand in that match, and it just being great. And these matches just feel like they're not trying hard to convince you that they're great, they just are great. Which I just love that so much. More than any other feud in New Japan, there's not pomp and circumstance around this feud. It just feels like a natural story that tells itself. And I've just really enjoyed it. And if you haven't checked out their matches, or if you can't remember them, go back and you won't be disappointed. Number 17, Okada versus Osprey. I just want to say I am aware of the allegations against Osprey. And I guess it's not even allegations, it's just the truth about how Osprey has conducted himself within the UK independent scene with Pollyanna and the like. And so if Osprey gets his due and is kind of put on hold for a little while, I wouldn't be totally against that. I think that it's important for companies to set a precedent right now that that kind of behavior isn't going to be tolerated. I do think Osprey's apologies, I didn't plan to go on this serious rant about this topic right here, but here we are. I think Osprey's apologies are genuine, but I don't know. It just seems like he needs to just take a step back and learn. And I would love if he did that for himself, and if he didn't do that for himself, that the companies that employ him would kind of encourage him to. But it is what it is. I'm just going to talk about the wrestling. I just wanted to get that out there. I don't want anyone to think that I'm ignoring it. It is terrible, terrible stuff, and Okada's great. Osprey is a bit of a jerk, it seems like, and a bit of an ignorant person. None of us are perfect, and Osprey definitely isn't, but yeah, it seems like he's done some bad stuff, and I am talking about this in a very inefficient, uncomfortable way, so I'm going to move on, but I know what's happening with Osprey, and I get it. I totally support New Japan's decision if they decided to put him on hold for a little while. Anyways, Okada and Osprey have had 3 matches in the last 3 years. Anniversary Show 2018, New Japan Cup 2019, and G1 29. This is another story that just feels supernatural, and it's told simply and effectively. It's just the story of Okada letting Osprey into chaos in 2016, and then finally, in that anniversary show, Osprey has the junior title and gets his chance to prove himself to the guy that's brought him into the company and has been mentoring him. And Osprey just really sells how much he would love to get the win over Okada and just show how far he's come. But he falls short in an incredible but straightforward match. And then they build up to the New Japan Cup in 2019, where Osprey again falls short. That match doesn't stick out to me as much as the other two. I don't know if I was like as invested in that New Japan Cup last year as I have been in other times in these last three years in New Japan. So that doesn't mean that match isn't fantastic. I just don't remember it as much, to be honest. And then their match in G1 29, which maybe my match of the year last year. I don't remember exactly everything that went down last year, but if I went down and made a list, I think it'd definitely be top 5, and it might even top the list. It's just 2 of the best. Legitimately, I think, unfortunately, the extracurriculars out of the ring are unfortunate, but in my opinion, 2 of the greatest in-ring performers that I've ever seen. Not that I've seen enough wrestling to be like the guy that decides these things, but these guys are just both incredible. And that match they had at G129 as a culmination, not a culmination because the story's still being told, but as that next chapter in this Okada versus Osprey story, where Osprey is just getting closer and closer and working his way up to be Okada's equal, it was just an insane match. That chop that Osprey laid into Okada in the middle of the match was insane. Like, one of the most, like, OMG, grab in your face moments in wrestling I can remember. And then that finishing sequence was just otherworldly, like, out of this world, insane. I just remember, I think this might be a bad confession, but I think I might have been like half watching that match while I was driving, and I was almost to the destination, and then I got to the destination, and I didn't go in until the match was over, because that last 5-10 minutes of that match were just captivating, and so I just had to take a second to just tune in to what was happening and take in the action. And yeah, I would love for Osprey to learn and to get help and to take some time away from wrestling, but eventually I do think he deserves the chance to come back, and above any other story that he has going on in New Japan, this story with Okada is the one that I am most anxious to see get its next few chapters and culminate. And yeah, the questions are, will Osprey ever beat Okada? And if he does, what will it mean for the landscape of New Japan as a whole and in Chaos? And yeah, I just can't wait to get the answers to those questions. Next, we have, at number 16, Tetsuya Naito versus Chris Jericho. This is a little bit more of a abbreviated feud as far as these last few that I've been listing. But it feels like it deserves this place on the list just because of its importance for the promotion as a whole. Like, we had the Omega Jericho feud, which I will get to. But then Jericho, it was clear that Jericho didn't just come to face Omega. Jericho came to actually not be a full part of New Japan, but to be a part of these main storylines being told in New Japan. And just seeing him in the ring with Naito, seeing him in the ring with Omega was insane, and it was like a trip. But seeing him in the ring with Naito was like this moment of like, okay, Jericho really is here in New Japan, and this is actually happening. And yeah, I just remember that being a really cool feeling. They had matches at Dominion in 2018, and then at Wrestle Kingdom 13. That press conference before Wrestle Kingdom was amazing. I wrote it in all caps. And then all the promos in this rivalry were great. Especially when Jericho taunted Naito for overshadowing his main event at Wrestle Kingdom 12. After Naito's history and relationship with the Tokyo Dome main event, it just felt like, dang, Jericho, you're really going to go there? And it just added this personal element to the rivalry where he was telling Naito, you might have been the main event of Wrestle Kingdom 12, but me and Omega stole the show. And in a lot of the fans' minds, it was like, he's not lying. Like, Naito, you've gotten your championship match at the Tokyo Dome twice, but neither time you've really been able to, either within the storyline or outside of kayfabe, you've really been able to completely deliver and come through. And so, yeah, Jericho kind of serving as this next stepping stone in Naito's ultimate journey that we've seen him on these past few years, or this past decade now. Which I say that like I've been watching from the beginning. I just have gone back and educated myself for sure. I don't want to act like I've been watching. I'm a real New Japan fan who's been watching since 2007. Though, no, I came in for Wrestle Kingdom 11. That's the truth. But, yeah. Jericho was a really effective heel and foil to Naito on his way, on his journey towards accepting the Intercontinental Championship, which was ultimately... I'll talk about that more later, but it's kind of what he needed to do to make his way to the top of the company. And I think just seeing that title in the hands of someone as despicable as Jericho to him made him value what that belt meant and the legacy of that belt. Even though it's a short legacy, the legacy of that belt. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it, especially, like I said, whenever Jericho made things a little bit more personal. I enjoyed how different their match felt at Dominion compared to the rest of the card and compared to how New Japan matches regularly feel. It was such a brawl, and I think the brawl before the match lasted every bit as long as the actual match did, which was a really cool change of pace in my opinion. And it was the perfect kind of match to go on before Okada and Omega, because we all know that show was about Okada versus Omega, so Naito and Jericho went out there and had a fun brawl with an annoying finish, and it didn't take away from the heat and the expectation that was building up to Okada and Omega, so it really did a great job on the card. And then at Wrestle Kingdom 13, in my opinion, Naito and Jericho stole the show. If you like the Tanahashi Omega match more, or some other match on the card more, fair. But to me, that was the best match on the show. Just building off of the story they told at Dominion, and building on the expectations that match set, with some really, really tense near falls down the stretch. I just really, really love that match. And also an addendum before I move on. After Jericho's cheap win and post-match assault at Dominion, Evil getting to come out and step up to Jericho and make the save for his leader Naito. It was a really, really huge moment in Evil's career, being able to see him go face to face with Chris Jericho. Like, as Sanada has had this feud with Okada, which we're about to get to, but as Evil's peer, Sanada has had Okada to really grasp onto and have this high-profile rival. It was cool to see Evil. Not that Evil and Jericho had any kind of an amazing rivalry, but it was cool to see Evil come out and just be like, I'm a major player here in New Japan, and I'm going to step to you, and I'm not going to let you get away with coming in here and just trouncing all over this culture and what we've established here. And I just really enjoyed that for Evil, on top of everything that Naito and Jericho delivered. Moving on, number 15, like I said, it's Okada versus Sanada. If anything, I think one could argue that this rivalry has felt a little bit forced at times. I don't completely disagree with that sentiment, but I still think that these two have gone and delivered a great series of matches. And even when they're carrying the weight of predictability and the weight of repetition, they're 8 matches in, but every time they've delivered something interesting and something new. And the most incredible thing about it is that it still feels like there's so much story to be told there. And it wouldn't surprise me that at the end of these guys' careers, they've gone one-on-one in high-profile, big matches close to 20 times. I really think we're just halfway through with that. And, the match quality has been great. It has felt just a bit put on at times. But take Okada's word for it. He's claimed and gone on record that Sanada is the greatest rival of his in his generation in wrestling. And so Rainmaker's going to speak. We better listen to him, that's for sure. Their matches in the last 3 years. G127, New Beginning in Osaka, New Japan Cup Final 2019, Wrestling Dontaku 2019, G129, and King of Pro Wrestling 2019. That's a lot of matches. That's a sea of matches, especially in 2019. They overdid this a little bit. But still, I think it deserves its place, this spot on the card, listen to me, on the list. Just because the highs of this feud have been so high, but also it's consistent and it feels whole and it feels meaningful. Every time these guys meet, it feels like a part of something bigger, which I just really enjoy. Anyways, the moment when Sanada got the win over Okada in G129, as time was about to expire, was incredibly well done, and it's just one of my favorite sequences in wrestling. Those last few minutes of that match, I remember I wasn't able to get up that night or that morning and watch that match, and so I was watching that match on my phone at work, at this sandwich shop that I worked at, and I was up at the cash register watching the match, and I was trying to stay cool and not act like a crazy person, but I was kind of freaking out a little bit, just because those closing moments in that match were so tense, and it felt like Sanada has to get the win, right? But they still did everything to make you doubt and make you think that they might go to a draw, which I thought was just really smart. Then, just a couple of months later, Okada served Sanada another loss when it really mattered at King of Pro Wrestling. It was when Sanada was going for Okada's title to insert himself into the picture for the double gold dash at Wrestle Kingdom. And it felt unlikely, but it felt a little bit believable that maybe Sanada, he had gotten the upper hand in the G1, maybe he was going to pull it off, and maybe he was going to face Naito in the main event of Night 2 at Wrestle Kingdom. But in the end, Okada said, nope, Sanada, you might have got the best of me in the G1, but I'm still the guy that you're looking up to. I'm still the guy that you're going to have to keep chasing. And yeah, like I said, there's been so many matches, and they've all been great, but it still feels like this feud is looking forward, and I really enjoy that. And yeah, I do hope that they take a bit of a break from it. They don't go back to this too much for maybe a year or so, maybe a year and a half, but I think before too long they can get back to telling the story, and I don't think I'll be alone when I say I'll be fully invested in it. I'll be pulling for Sanada. I love Okada. He's one of my favorite wrestlers, and even though he's booked so strong, it's hard not to root for him sometimes, like within the story, just because he's so great. It's like rooting for LeBron. It's like the same kind of thing in my head. But they've made me want to see Sanada jump that hurdle and get that one over Okada, which speaks to the greatness of this rivalry. And even though sometimes it feels a bit unnatural and a bit in your face, there's still something really special about it, and there's still something really special about the chemistry between the two of them. So, yeah, it's been great so far, and I can't wait to see more. Number 14, we have another Okada rivalry. We have Kazuchika Okada versus Minoru Suzuki. Their matches at New Beginning 2017, G1 27, Suzuki's 30th anniversary show, G1 28, and at Royal Quest have all been incredible. I think some of those matches are a bit more reserved and cool than some of the other matches of those 5, I think. But as a whole, that series of matches is just strong, and the in-ring work is just incredible. This is really the part of the list where things start to elevate, and these are really like the greatest rivalries in wrestling over these past few years to me. And even though they had matches in the early 2010s, 20-teens, whatever you call them, this newest part of their rivalry began at New Year's Dash in 2017 when Suzuki-gun returned. I had just started watching New Japan, but that moment at New Year's Dash where Suzuki-gun stormed the ring and attacked Chaos, it presented them as a big deal, and I was like, oh, I don't know who these guys are, but I'm here for it. And they turned around and they had Suzuki they put Suzuki in the spot of being the first title challenger for Okada after that world-shifting, incredible match between Okada and Omega at Wrestle Kingdom 11. They gave Suzuki that tall task of being Okada's next challenger, and in my opinion, he more than delivered. I've seen the criticisms of that match. It's too long. Okada's comeback is like something you'd expect out of Cena or Reigns in the WWE. And I think those are valid criticisms, but to me, that match in particular and all other matches have been worked in a way that earns that formula much more than what I stated prior, or who I stated prior, that company that I stated prior. Even when Suzuki is dishing out strikes and just battering Okada with brutal submission holds, it never feels like Okada's out of it. He's fighting back the whole time. It's not like Suzuki is just decimating him. I think maybe that New Beginning match, but it worked for what it was because it needed to feel as epic as possible after that Wrestle Kingdom 11 match between Okada and Omega. And they went out there and they gave an epic match. It definitely had its flaws, but I was new to New Japan, and after Okada Omega, I was like, is this how all the matches are? And then I saw Okada Suzuki, and I was like, not quite, but that was still incredible. And so, I just remember watching that match and how it made me feel. And, it was just epic, and all of their matches have felt like that epic war. Suzuki brings out a side of Okada that only Suzuki does. It's the underdog role that we rarely get to see Okada in. And, Suzuki's been unable to score a win over the Rainmaker in the last 3 years. Even still, though, every time they meet, even most recently at Royal Quest, Okada somehow feels like the underdog. The way they just tell the story in the ring, it just positions Okada as the guy that's fighting from underneath. And just like I said with Okada and Sanada, it's a different situation for sure. But even with Suzuki approaching the end of his career, it feels like there's more story to be told. There's more meat on the bone. That's like the catchphrase of this channel, I guess. But, I'm here to see these guys wrestle 10 more times if they want to give that to us. Every time it's incredible. I think if I had to pick one match out of their series, it's either that New Beginning show, just because of the memory of like getting acquainted with New Japan is really fond to me. But that Royal Quest match, I just rewatched it today, and The environment that was there in the UK in the Copper Box was insane. And Suzuki's strikes ringing out through that arena are just so brutal. And yeah, it's just everything that's good about both of these wrestlers, and they really bring the best of each other. So definitely deserves that spot on the list, if not higher. If you would have it higher on your list, I would totally get that. Next, at number 13, we have Hiromu Takahashi versus Dragon or Ryu Lee. To be honest, with these two, I wasn't aware of the history that they had between them before they started exploring the feud in New Japan. However, that hasn't at all limited my ability to buy into the narrative and the story that these two tell in the ring, which I think is such a testament to the talent that these guys possess. Even though I had no context for their rivalry or their dynamic, from the first build, the first match that I've seen between these two, I was like, okay, these guys really, really, really want to hurt each other, and these guys really, really, really want to show that they're the better man. And it's just a simple wrestling story that is straightforward, but it still has nuance. But maybe it doesn't have nuance, and maybe that's okay. Like, maybe these guys just want to kill each other, and maybe that's fine, because it's pro wrestling. I'm being extra. I need to settle down. They've wrestled 5 times since 2017, twice in Best of the Super Juniors, which Dragon Lee won both of those, and then 3 successful title defenses by Hiromu at New Beginning in 2017, which, like I said, I think that might have been the same show where Okada and Suzuki wrestled, and yeah, I just remember that feeling of getting acquainted with New Japan, and this rivalry was a part of that. I just remember it fondly for that. And then at the G1 Special in San Francisco and New Beginning in 2020. So yeah, the story has been that, and the real beauty of this feud has been that both of these guys are fully committed to the fast-paced, hard-hitting style that really lets them show their strengths. And yeah, I think in some rivalries I want the matches to vary and to be different and there to be ebbs and flows, but no, when these guys get in the ring, they want to go at each other hard, and they want to go at each other fast, and they want to finish the other one off. And yeah, that style did lead to the one major blemish in this rivalry, which is the unfortunate ending to their match in San Francisco, where Hiromu's neck was broken. I believe that's confirmed, if not broken, seriously injured, taking a Dragon Driver from Lee. One of the scarier moments I've ever experienced as a fan of wrestling, and it was a moment where I really had to be like, man, this New Japan stuff is crazy. But in the end, I know that the style that is worked in New Japan is for the most part safe. It's just sometimes these guys are let off the leash, and they're just allowed to go out there and just really, really express the story that they want to batter each other, and they actually do it. And sometimes things get scary, like I said with the Buchi and Naito rivalry, and this was like the realization of that next to the Shibata situation with Okada. When Lee dropped Hiromu back on his head, just even though Hiromu incredibly got right back up and finished the match, I was like, there's no way that man is okay. Like, that man is messed up. And yeah, it came out that his neck was broken or seriously injured, and fortunately and incredibly, like I said, he got up and finished the match, and even more incredibly, after surgery and rehab, he returned less than a year and a half later. So it's so good to have Hiromu back. I think we're really feeling that right now with the New Japan Cup going on. He's a real contender, and he's a real interesting part of the tournament. And so I'm just thankful that Hiromu made it back from injury. He's one of the best wrestlers in the world, in my opinion. One of the most enjoyable. But the post-broken neck portion of this rivalry has been handled with class as well. With Hiromu and Lee tagging together on Night 2 of Wrestle Kingdom before eventually meeting again in a singles match in February. The easy thing would have been to have Hiromu just return and just immediately go after Dragon Lee, just go for his neck. He wants to come and batter the guy that almost ended his career. But instead, they chose to show restraint and maturity in the way they told this story. And they were teammates on the biggest stage in wrestling at the Tokyo Dome. I sound like such a mark. I understand WrestleMania is a thing. At the biggest stage in New Japan. They team up together, and it shows that there's solidarity and professionalism between the two of them before they get back to their ugly, hard-hitting, but like I said, very professional rivalry. So even though maybe what some of us wanted in our gut and what would have been the easy thing to do was for just them to have a blood feud immediately, I like that they showed that restraint in having them, like I said, show solidarity between each other before getting back to where they left off. I can't wait to see more matches between these two in the future, and I hope that we get it at an even bigger stage like Dominion or Wrestle Kingdom. I think this feud deserves that stage. And yeah, the only thing I'll say is I would not mind at all if they avoided using the Dragon Driver from now on. Seriously. I'll go on that same rant I went on for Buchi and Naito. Be careful, guys. Please. Anyways, number 12. Tomohiro Ishii versus Tetsuya Naito. If it's not obvious, if I am overrating any rivalry based on personal bias, this is the one. Whatever, I have no shame. But before you dismiss this ranking, let me defend my case. These two have gone one-on-one 5 times since 2017. G1 Special in USA, G1 27, King of Pro Wrestling 2017, G1 28, and G1 29. Each of these matches have completely delivered. Their series of matches in 2017 played on fan expectations so well, with Ishii upsetting Naito in the first round of the inaugural U.S. title tournament, which became a trend in his working his way to the final, where he was upsetting tournament favorites, and Ishii was really showing his toughness and showing his resilience. And so he gets that shocking win over Naito in the first round, and then he moves on and faces him a couple months later in the G1, and again defeats him, even though I think the fan expectation widely was, okay, Ishii beat him a couple months ago, Naito's got to get his win back. Naito's higher up on the card, Naito's got to establish himself again. But instead, Ishii defeats him again, and I just love when New Japan does it really well, because they're so based on patterns in the way they book that when they pull the rug out from under the fans and do something like that plays on what fans think they know about how New Japan books, I just really enjoy that kind of stuff, and this is a perfect example of that. And both of those matches were really great in the ring. That match in the U.S. title tournament delivered way more than it needed to. It was just a first-round match. Ishii was going to come out later and wrestle again against Sabre Jr., and the next night come out and wrestle like an epic match against Omega, a long match, a hard-hitting match against Omega. He could have come out, and they could have had a straightforward match, but Ishii always delivers, and I think that clearly there's a pride to him about his work, and they delivered not like an incredible, insane match in that G1 Special USA show, but it was more than they needed to, and then that G1 27 match was really great as well. And then moving on to King of Pro Wrestling 2017, Naito had to defend his rights to the main event in the Tokyo Dome against Ishii, and of course he won that match, but it was an incredible match, and Ishii's the best at, even when the cards are stacked against him and you just know deep down that he's not going to win the match. Like, something that comes to mind is Ishii Omega, which I will get to, for the heavyweight title at whatever show that was, Destruction or whatever. But Ishii just does an incredible job of making you forget your expectations and making you feel like he really has a chance to pull off the win against all odds. He just helps you buy into the story, and that's why I love him so much and enjoy watching him so much. Naito defeated him in that King of Pro Wrestling match, and then their most recent match was an excellent main event on a solid night in G1 29. But the match that I really want to highlight when I'm talking about this feud is the absolute banger that they had in Korakuen Hall on the 4th night of G1 28. The dynamic between these two that I enjoy so much was on full display that night. It's Ishii's immense toughness and just complete disinterest in showing any semblance of vulnerability or pain, anything that resembles that. He just doesn't show it. And I think just that the way that Ishii conducts himself in the ring, it just makes Naito have to take off that layer of tranquilo, and it shows. Naito's character shows in his match with Ishii. I really do care about this, and I really do care about winning these matches, and if I have to break a sweat, and if I have to act like I care, I guess I will. So the stupid Ishii fella is going to make me do it, but here we go. Here comes Tryhard Naito. And I just love when Tryhard Naito gets brought out. It's just special when that happens. And in that G128 match, it was just incredible, and we saw that side of Naito come out just as much in that match as ever. It's truly an underrated match, a hidden gem in my opinion. It's probably my second favorite G1 match of the last 3 tournaments, behind only Buchi and Tanahashi's final. Like, I really love it that much. I know that a lot of you guys are probably hearing this and saying, what is matches that he even talking about? But just go back and watch it. Night 4, G128, Ichi versus Naito. The Korakuen Hall crowd is unglued in the final stretch of that match, and just, it's 2 of my favorite guys in wrestling just doing their thing and playing off each other in a really interesting way that they always do. So yeah, Ishii brings the best of everyone, and Naito is for sure no exception. Not that Naito can't carry the weight on his own, but Ishii's the best. We all just need to admit it. Ishii's the best and deserves all the belts. But yeah, I don't want to go on another tangent about Ishii. Watch this match if you haven't. Watch all these matches if you're not remembering them as fondly as I remember them. I could just love both of these guys a lot, but I really think that, especially the quality of that G128 match, it's just insane stuff. It's one of my favorite matches in the past few years. Check it out if you don't remember what I'm talking about. Moving on to the final entry in this part 2 video of my top 30 rivalries in New Japan of the last 3 years since Wrestle Kingdom 11. It's such a long thing. Number 11, Kazuchika Okada versus Hiroshi Tanahashi. It's probably accurate to say that the best days of this all-time great rivalry passed before 2017, but it would be crazy to dismiss the last 4 chapters between these two as anything less than incredible. At Wrestling Dontaku in 2018, the two had a highly emotional match where the ace of the past stepped up to the current ace of the company, the top guy, and said, I'm not going to let you break my consecutive successful defenses of that title record. I'm not going to let you break that record and get away with it. So even though the story tells us that Tanahashi, just based on recent form, doesn't have a chance in that match, when the bell rings at Wrestling Dontaku 2018, it's an even playing field. And I think that even though I hadn't been following that feud live as it happened, I had gone back and I watched the matches, and I think within the context of the feud, when that bell rings, you just know, okay, this is an Okada-Tanahashi match. This could go either way. Tanahashi had Okada's number for so long in these big matches. And yeah, it really felt like in that epic Okada title reign, many times the title felt like it was the title reign felt vulnerable, and that was partially what made that reign feel so great. But I don't know if it ever felt more vulnerable than it did on that night at Wrestling Dontaku. Yeah, like I said, it was immediately clear when that bell rung that the ace was willing to give everything, and he was a legitimate threat to the legendary title reign just because you knew that he was going to give it everything that he had. But he fell short, ultimately, which led to Okada breaking Tanahashi's record and facing Omega in that Dominion match in 2018, which, trust me, we're going to get to that one. Then a couple months later at G128, Tanahashi clawed his way to a draw with Okada to clinch his spot in the final. Tanahashi had fallen short of beating Okada, something he had been unable to do since Wrestle Kingdom 9. So it had been, I don't know, what would that make it? Like 3.5, 4 years, I believe, since Tanahashi had scored a win over Okada, and they still showed the restraint in that G1. Tanahashi, all he had to do was draw, and if I had a problem with that match, it felt more like Tanahashi was on top as time expired. I think it would have been more effective if Tanahashi barely survived that match, but that's just nitpicking. Tanahashi fights his way to a draw. In the end, that's what matters. And he clinches his win in Block A of G1, and he goes on to win the G1, which says, I'm not done at the top. I want one more chance. And but before he could get that chance in the Tokyo Dome at Wrestle Kingdom 13, Tanahashi met Okada again in the main event of Destruction in Kobe, which told the story of Tanahashi finally defeating Okada once again to retain his spot at Wrestle Kingdom 13. The story told in that match was perfect and really cemented the fact that the Ace was not, like I said, not ready to give up his spot in the main event or at the top of the company, and he was going to fight with everything he had to stand up for what he believed wrestling to be, and it transitioned perfectly into that feud with Omega, and it was just an incredible match. Definitely one of the greatest New Japan matches I've seen, and right up there with the best of this rivalry, that match they had at Destruction in Kobe. And then, finally, after what was likely Tanahashi's final run at the top, the former and current ace met on the opening night of G129 in Dallas. I was there. That's where these are from. I can't believe I was there. I still smile when I think about it. I was there for that match. Okada defeated Tanahashi. I said I was there like 4 times. I really need you guys to know, guys. I was there. I saw that match in person. It was nuts. But Okada defeated Tanahashi in a fun but strikingly one-sided match. And to me, I think that match in Dallas could very well serve as the conclusion to one of wrestling's greatest stories ever told. Maybe it's the selfish part of me. I want to be able to say I saw the period to that story. I saw the final chapter to that story. But it really did feel final. It felt like, all right, Okada had that lapse in 2018 where he went through that phase where he lost the title and dyed his hair. And but now that the Rainmaker's back and he's in his prime, I just don't know if Tanahashi's ever going to be able to catch back up to him. So I think there's a chance that that match in Dallas is the end. However, I can't help but feel deep down that these two all-time greats may have one more epic, incredible all-time great match to officially close the book on their rivalry. It makes sense narratively for Okada to go over Tanahashi in a straightforward fashion like that to close the rivalry, but if they wanted to revisit it and have this epic ending to this story, I don't think any of us would be opposed, and I totally see that as something that could happen. So if it does, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm all about it. But if I got to see the end of their rivalry in Dallas, that's awesome too. It's difficult for me to only have this feud at number 11 on this list, but I just feel that the rivalries I have in the top 10 have meant more for the present and the future of New Japan as a whole. While the last couple years of this have sometimes felt like a nostalgia field greatest hits, I think, which that sounds super critical, and that's only sometimes. At its worst, this rivalry in the past 3 years has felt like nostalgia and felt like just a greatest hits album. I think it has been meaningful, and it has been an important part of Okada's legacy, which Okada's legacy is New Japan right now. But for the most part, New Japan is Okada's legacy. Obviously, there's more going on. I don't need to fully explain myself. You guys know what I'm saying. But just to me, the matches or the rivalries that I have ranked in the top 10 ahead of this are just a little bit more relevant right now. Even though some of them might not have like the epic feel of the Okada-Tanahashi rivalry or even the match quality, because those last 4 matches between Okada and Tanahashi have been amazing. I really feel good about this list. Hesitantly, it is a little bit weird to only have this at 11, but stick around for part 3. I'm going to give you my top 10, and then you guys can all hate on me in the comments if you want to for putting X rivalry above Okada Tanahashi. I'm just talking about the last 3 years. If we're talking about rivalries for the last decade or all-time rivalries, like obviously Okada Tanahashi would have to be near the top of the list, if not at the very top of the list. But in the last 3 years, I'm putting it at number 11, and I'm going to stick to my guns. So yeah, not hating on it at all. All of these rivalries at this point are incredible. So I'm sure you guys, if you guys are watching this video, you've seen these Okada Tanahashi matches, but check them out. Anyways, stick around for part 3 of this series. I'm going to get into my top 10 rivalries since Wrestle Kingdom 11 in New Japan. I can't wait to share them with you. This has been so much fun just to write these scripts and these notes for these videos and just present to y'all how I feel about all of these incredible memories that I've been accumulating over the last few years. So yeah, thank you for joining me. I think this video is pushing nearly an hour. So if you stuck with me near the end, I appreciate you so much. I love all of y'all so much. Thank you for watching. Come back for part 3. I'll have it posted probably sometime after my New Japan Cup reviews for this next run of New Japan Cup shows. But until then, I love y'all. Like I said, I appreciate y'all. Peace.